Welcome to the Cedar Creek Bible in a Year podcast. Whether you are listening on your own, with a friend, or a group of friends, we hope this podcast helps you connect with Scripture and also enriches your relationship with God. Here are your hosts, Luke Shortridge and Andy Rechtenwald.
Hi guys, welcome to the Bible in a Year podcast. This is Luke Shortridge hanging out with Andy Rechtenwald. Andy, how are you, my friend?
Always great, Luke. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I see you have your coffee brewed.
Yes,
warm.
I got my coffee from Plate 21, a great local coffee shop.
What are they paying us for that radio spot you just gave them?
Moving on.
Okay. Well, I am super excited about today. Today we are talking about the book of Esther. She was a woman of beauty and courage. Also, Esther is one of two books in the Bible written after women, which makes it unique, stand out a little bit.
Yep.
So to start things off today, I set up a little game. Andy, confirm that you have no knowledge of what we're about to do.
Yeah, it's been really bothering me. I hate going into a quiz and not knowing what's going on.
Fantastic. So what I did is I went through the Internet Movie Database and looked up the top, I guess it's my opinion, top movies that have starring female leads.
Okay.
And these are action movies. So we're looking for leading women in a strong, courageous role.
Oh, boy. Now, they are the lead actor, not
Yes.
like, okay.
Right,
Got it.
right.
Yep. Okay, I got a couple in my head already.
Okay.
Let's go.
Good. That will probably help you. You have to give me either the character name or the actress that played that character. We're going to see how many you can get. We'll see how good you're doing.
Let's party.
All right. So here is the first one. I got a little bit of a softball for you.
Okay.
Tomb Raider.
I'm drawing a blank.
You can give us the
Lara Croft.
Character name. Lara Croft is correct. So
It is Angelina Jolie.
Oh,
Sorry.
wow, you get them both. No extra credit for that.
Oh,
but
really?
Great job. All right, next up, G.I. Jane.
Demi Moore. Demi Moore, however you pronounce it.
Yeah, we'll accept either way.
I don't know the
That's
character.
great.
I just know that was a big deal when she played the Marine or whatever.
Jordan O'Neill was the character. So-
Jordan, okay. I thought that was a movie. I was like,
All right, you're 2 for 2. You're doing good.
Great. That's
Here's another
100%.
easy one. Ready?
Yep.
Hunger Games.
Katniss Everdeen.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you know the actress?
No.
Jennifer Lawrence.
Jennifer Lawrence. Yeah.
All right. Next up, this is a few years ago, but I'm confident you can get this one. Kill Bill. Part 1 or Part 2.
Uma Thurman.
Fantastic. Andy, you are 4 for 4. You know your strong female leads. This is great. Character there is the bride in the first movie, and then we find out her name is Beatrix Kiddo.
Yeah, you know, funny story. My grandma got me that for Christmas when I was 10. So.
That's not appropriate for a 10-year-old in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, this one is a little bit more tricky.
Is this progressively getting harder?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay. Well.
Okay, next up
Yep.
is Insurgent or Divergent.
Oh my gosh, I actually really like those movies. Kayla, my wife, took me to see one, or I took her to see one because she really liked the book. Great movies.
And you cared
She
so
is
much
She is from. There's
you
like factions and
could
stuff.
not
and
remember
Great movies. I cannot
the
remember
character name or the actress
You know
name.
what? I know that Kate Winslet is the opposing person, like the evil person in the movie. Does that give me a half a point?
No.
Kate Winslet. She's a
So
leading-
close, but...
Wait. Okay, I got nothing.
All right. Triss,
Triss.
played by Shailene Woodley.
Yep. I don't recognize her name at all, but I do recognize Triss. Great movies.
All right. Next up, we're going old school here.
Mm-hmm.
Aliens.
Yeah.
This is terrible
No.
radio. We're going to move on.
I've seen. Okay, go ahead.
You got 2 seconds.
Yeah, I can't think of her name. Oh, shoot. No,
Ellen Ripley,
Nope, doesn't ring a
played
bell.
by Sigourney Weaver.
That's the one. Sounds like a guy's name.
You were too young for those movies.
Can't say that, can I?
I can't
Moving
believe you
on.
said that about poor Sigourney. All right. And last but not least, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer is, I don't know. Didn't watch it.
Christy Swanson.
Yeah, wouldn't have gotten that.
Well, you started out strong. I guess
It
you need to work on your female movie leads.
You're right.
All right. Well, today we are talking about the book of Esther. And Esther was a woman of courage, beauty. She was also very wise, very smart,
Yeah.
as we will see. So what do you say? Want to jump in and start talking about the book here?
Yeah, let's jump in. So as far as the author goes, we always try to talk about context. The author, we don't really know who the author is, but some people like to say that it's Mordecai. Some have suggested Ezra or Nehemiah because of their writing style, but essentially we don't really know who wrote the book.
No, we sure don't. The purpose of the book, though, is really just to show God's sovereignty and his care for his people. Also to document the Jewish preservation from genocide.
Yeah.
And then to show the origins of the Jewish Feast of Purim, which is still celebrated today.
Yeah.
It kind of shows how that started.
Yeah, written about 470 BC in a place, or the setting, I guess, of the story is in Susa, an important city in the Persian Empire. What's really cool, though, I guess we'll get into it in the king stuff, but I know that the king in this story is the same king in the movie 300.
I know
which
that
fires
too.
me up. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, great movie. Go ahead.
So the key people for the book obviously would be Esther, also called Hadassah. And as we said, she's a woman of beauty, of character, combined courage, also with careful planning. She's a really, really cool chick, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah, she is. The book is great. And then Mordecai, he's one of the Jewish captives living in Susa. He's the oldest cousin of Esther. He plays an amazing role in this book in a couple different ways, so keep an eye on him.
Yeah, I think it's cool. Mordecai adopts Esther after her parents die.
Yeah.
So he's really like a father figure to her, looking out for her. But they're also like business partners too, which is interesting.
It is very interesting.
What a tangled web Esther weaves. All right, so King Xerxes, who you mentioned.
Yeah.
Tell us about him.
He's the king of Persia, son of Darius, and again, I'm pretty sure if I'm incorrect, then you can correct me. But he's the guy in the movie 300, the king in the movie 300, which is pretty cool. He is the grandson of Cyrus the Great. Esther spans the first half of his reign, and so it's pretty interesting because when you read the history behind this king, you can see that throughout this process, he's trying to conquer Greece. And so it's the 300 movie.
Yeah,
I just
and
can't get off
he's
that.
the most powerful man in the world
Yep.
at the time that this story takes place, which brings us to his queen,
Yeah.
whose name is Vashti. Her story is not so great.
Yeah,
but
it's interesting. We'll get into that.
We'll get into that.
And last one is Haman, most powerful official in all the empire. A bit evil. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But all the king's officials would actually bow to him. He had pretty much, other than Xerxes kind of stopping him, he had pretty much unlimited power. So
Perfect.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the mega themes that we see in this book.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, God using circumstances, that the circumstances Esther found herself in were not by accident, and she noticed that, figured that out,
Yep.
was able to use the circumstances she was placed in for God's good.
yeah, and that's the one thing we'll talk about is how a lot of times you can't control your circumstances, but you can control the way you react to those certain things.
How
We also
profound.
see righteous risk-taking, which is like where you see Esther and also Mordecai put themselves out there and risk their lives in order to live for God, which is really kind of crazy that you can draw that conclusion because God is never mentioned in the entire book.
Which is weird,
Which
because
is
it's in the
weird.
Bible.
Right, but no pronouns, no God, he, whatever. It's there's no mention of God.
But he's still actively at work.
Of course, yep.
And, righteous risk-taking really is about not staying comfortable,
Yeah.
choosing to get uncomfortable for the sake of what God is calling you to do.
Yeah, and I think that theme in particular is very it's very pertinent to what's going on in our world today, where in the Western Christianity, our comfortability level is much different than what you see over in the Middle East right now with the Christians that are being killed for their faith. So I think that's something
Just
we
a
could
little
definitely
bit.
pay attention to.
Just a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that does lead us to racial hatred, which is one element that maybe we would like to forget about, but you
Yeah.
can't. I
Nope.
mean, it's there. Haman, he's really driven by racial hatred of
Yep.
the Jewish people, and that causes him to plot against Mordecai and also all of the Jews.
Yeah.
And he's really driven by jealousy, anger, rage. Not so nice. It's
Right.
how he acted.
Not at all. And then finally, the last one is courage in action. And we see this throughout the entire Bible with examples of people who did the right thing in the face of harm's way, constantly putting themselves out there. It kind of goes along with the righteous risk-taking, but either way, we see the greatest example, obviously, in Jesus.
Right. This is a theme we'll see all throughout Scripture, but
Yep.
really we see it quite a bit in Esther.
Definitely.
So real quick, we'll go through the key events. Esther is just 10 chapters long. It's kind of a short book tucked away in the Old Testament, but does tell a story. Chapters 1 and 2 is the selection of a new queen. Chapters 3 and 4 are Haman's plot to destroy the Jews. Then after that, chapters 5 through 8, we see Esther acting courageously. And then finally, 9 and 10 shows the establishing of a new feast and then kind of the epilogue, what happens afterward.
Yeah, so before we jump in, guys, we just want you to know that every week when you listen to the podcast, we want to give you an opportunity to dive into God's Word with us. We obviously can't cover everything that happens in every book. I mean, not even close. We're not even going to get into a quarter of what you see in the book of Esther, but we highly recommend that you go back and read it for yourself. Read the whole book after the podcast and see where we highlighted, find other things in the book. Then we're also going to be reading the NLT version, so if you want to follow along, pull out your Bible. If you're not driving, switch to your Bible app on your phone so you can listen along. And then also, we're going to be asking some questions as we walk through this. If you're listening by yourself, take a moment to journal your answers to these questions. And if you're listening with a group of friends, just talk about the questions. Take a moment, pause the podcast, and talk about it. So you want to get us started, Luke?
Let's do it. So when we first arrive on the scene, we find out that King Xerxes is having a dinner party, not just a regular dinner party, but a 7-day dinner party. They're on day 7.
Yeah.
He's hanging out with his boys. They've been drinking, partying, probably getting kind of wild.
Yep.
And King Xerxes decides, hey, I want to call on my queen, and I'm going to have her come out, and I want my boys to gaze upon her beauty. She refuses, so we got a problem.
Yep.
And that picks us up. It's Esther 1. We're going to start at verse 15. Andy, you want to read?
Yep. Says, "What must be done to Queen Vashti?" the king demanded. "What penalty does the law provide for a queen who refuses to obey the king's orders, properly sent through his eunuchs?" Memucan answered the king and his nobles, "Queen Vashti has wronged not only the king, but also every noble and citizen throughout your empire. Women everywhere will begin to despise their husbands when they learn that Queen Vashti has refused to appear before the king. Before this day is out, the wives of all the king's nobles throughout Persia and Media will hear what the queen did and will start treating their husbands the same way. There will be no end to their contempt and anger."
All right, so here's my question. Is it ever appropriate for a wife to defy her husband?
Of course. Yeah, of course. I think, like abuse, if your husband's trying to get you to sin in any way, influencing you, that, of course, there's always appropriate times to defy your husband.
Okay.
But what's the flip side?
The flip side, is it ever appropriate for a husband to defy his wife?
That's
Oh,
a good
touche.
question. Yeah, I didn't see that one coming.
Not so PC in our culture today.
Yeah, of course it is. If the wife is trying to get her husband to sin, all that kind of stuff. If there's abuse, of course.
Yeah, I think you have to put God at the top of your hierarchy.
Yep.
And you have to follow him in front of anybody else.
Yeah.
And if anyone in your life, including those who are closest to you, ask you to do something that defies God, you can't.
Right.
If you do, then you have literally made that person an idol in your life.
Exactly.
You've made them more important than God.
Yep.
So we don't really know why exactly the queen refused. I was reading some commentators were kind of guessing. Some thought that maybe she was pregnant and she didn't want to come out in her pregnant state. Other people thought maybe she was just right defiant. Didn't want to hang out with a bunch of drunks, which I don't really blame her on.
Yeah.
But regardless of the fact, King Xerxes kind of freaks out. I mean, he's used to getting whatever he wants, whenever he wants it.
Yep.
So he's like, all of these things of, maybe husbands everywhere will disobey their wives. Maybe no husbands will ever get respect again if I allow this to happen.
Right.
So they kind of make a mountain out of a molehill,
Oh, yeah.
in my opinion. And they decide that as a result, the queen should be deposed.
Right, and I think the historical thing here is that he's about to invade Greece, one of the world's strongest military nations, and so he needs to save face. If his queen is disobeying him, and now there's going to be, according to his advisors, civil unrest throughout the entire kingdom,
Right.
he needs to act soon, or otherwise, he could never conquer Greece. So what does he do next?
Well, he decides to hold a competition. So whatever young woman most pleases the king will be made queen.
It's like The Bachelor.
Kinda.
Yeah, I mean, right? I mean, I've seen one or two episodes of The Bachelor, but it's like the same thing.
I think this came before The Bachelor.
Right.
though.
So, okay, totally. So Esther, along with many other young women, are taken to the king's harem. They are prepared with beauty. And then, how long was it again? Do you remember reading how long that it took them?
It was over a year.
Yeah, to get
1
ready.
year to get ready for one night.
Now, I know that, if I may, women take a little bit of time to get ready before we go.
Careful,
anywhere.
Andy.
Kayla,
Walk delicately.
You do a really good job at this, but you still take a little bit longer than I do. I can
can't
say that, right?
believe you used the podcast to air your dirty marriage laundry. Andy, this podcast is a sacred trust.
Well, now the trust has been broken, apparently. But let me a year? Really? A year?
I can just see the emails flooding in now. 5 or 6 of them. It's going to be crazy.
You know what? Maybe she's working out, or she's a busy person. She's a way better parent than I am. I'm like the assistant parent. She's got a lot going on, so sometimes it takes her a little bit longer to get ready. I'm just saying it's not a bad thing. Women have to, we're dudes. We don't care what we look like, that kind of stuff.
All right, we better move on quick
I'm
because
sorry.
you're in a lot of trouble
Sorry,
right now.
Kayla.
So Mordecai tells Esther not to reveal her nationality, but she is chosen in this competition.
Mm-hmm.
So she is selected. She's got one shot to impress the king.
Yeah.
It's kind of sadistic, but the king spends a night with all of the women in this competition.
Right.
If she impresses him, maybe he sees them again. If she really impresses him, maybe she becomes the new queen. If not, he never sees her again.
Right.
She's totally cast aside.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going to pick things up here. We are in Esther 2:15. So Esther was the daughter of Abihail, who was Mordecai's uncle. Mordecai had adopted his younger cousin, Esther. When it was Esther's turn to go to the king, she accepted the advice of Haggai, the eunuch in charge of the harem. She asked for nothing except for what he suggested, and she was admired by everyone who saw her. So what's interesting here is Esther shows herself to be wise by taking advice.
Yeah.
Sometimes to be a good leader means that you have to be a good follower.
Yeah.
So here's my question. Think about a time that someone gave you timely advice, and how did it help you? All right, I got a quick story. I got to tell this. At a certain time, a young, hopeful, starry-eyed youth pastor came to me. Student ministry pastor came to me.
Yeah, you said the word.
And he said, Luke, I need to ask your advice. Should I ask Kayla to marry me? Do you remember what my response was?
You better do it now because you'll never do better than her.
That's exactly what I told you. I said, buddy, are you silly? You better jump on that train before it takes off and leaves the station.
That actually happened.
So
Great advice, and I'm married to her, and so there we go. I listened.
Good job, man.
Yeah, did my best.
You're a good leader by being a good follower on that one. All right,
Yeah.
I also got another key piece of advice given to me by Ed Bellner before the birth of my first son. I think I might have told you this one too, but he said, okay, when you're in the delivery room, this is critical. And for all husbands out there that potentially, may be looking forward to the birth of their first child, only give her one finger. If you let your wife hold on to 2 or more fingers, she is going to wrench that thing so hard, it will never be the same. If you just give her one finger, probably pointer finger, then
You'll be fine.
you'll be fine.
You can live with 9,
withstand it.
right? You can live with 9 fingers.
I don't think that's the point of the advice. But
Oh, okay.
I see where
Sorry.
you're going with that.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. So what's next?
Well, Esther pleases the king greatly. She wins the competition, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
King is impressed so much so that she becomes the new queen. So, which is kind of crazy. And again, you have to keep in mind that the king did not know she was Jewish.
Right.
She concealed that part, and she is made the new queen.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that her and the king are equals, right?
Not at all. No, we saw that with Vashti. She got kicked out for not coming and hanging out with him. So
Long periods of time would go by, and Esther would not be called on.
Right.
So even though she's the queen, it's not like marriage today in America where you have a husband and wife who are equals. King is still in charge. He's still
Right.
calling the shots.
by far. So then Mordecai, this is interesting. Next, he hears a plot to assassinate the king, and then tells Esther about it. So she gives Mordecai credit and tells the eunuchs to tell the king that he's about to be killed. And then he is promoted. So God here uses Esther's position for his purposes to kind of bring her, to give Mordecai more of a, a platform or maybe honor through this process, which is really,
Absolutely.
really cool.
Absolutely. But he's not the only one who gets promoted.
Yeah, that's bad.
Haman, he's kind of our evil villain
Yeah,
during
he's
this
the
story, I
villain.
would say.
Yeah.
Haman is also promoted. He's pompous. He tells other officials to bow down to him. And one guy refuses. Want to guess who that is?
Mordecai.
Of course. Mordecai won't bow down to Haman because Mordecai is Jewish. He's a
Yeah.
devout Jew.
Yep.
And he will worship God alone. So Haman's furious. I mean, he's jealous. He's angry. And he comes up with this plan. He tells the king, there's a certain group of people who keep themselves separate. King, they won't bow down to you.
They have different laws, all that kind of
Right.
stuff.
They won't bow down to me. They have their own set of laws. And he also gives the king kind of a financial stipulation in this, that if we can attack these people, and again, King Xerxes is about to attack Greece, so attacking people is kind of what he does.
Yeah.
He says, if we attack this certain people, there'll be a ton of money in it for us. And he gets the king to sign a decree where the Jewish people are allowed to be killed, persecuted, exterminated. Their property can be seized without any consequences for it.
Right.
And the king agrees. Sure, why not? Sounds good. What's the downside?
Really, and then you see Mordecai. He finds out. He goes into mourning, and it's interesting the way people mourned back then compared to people mourning today. They shave their heads, put sackcloth on, put ashes all over themselves,
Tear their clothing.
all that kind of stuff. So he does this stuff. Esther hears about it and tries to console him to no avail. So we're going to pick up the story here in Esther 4:13 through 17. It says, Mordecai sent this reply to Esther: "Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace you will escape when all other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this?" Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go and gather together all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though it is against the law, I will go in to see the king. If I must die, I must die." So Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him.
What an incredible woman.
Yeah.
If I die, I die.
I highlighted that in 3 different colors. I just kept going because that is just amazing. Amazing.
Do you think most men like strong women?
I think so.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I love about this is just her boldness.
Yeah.
Just, you know what? I'm in this position, and if I have to die, then I have to die.
Right. And
that's what it takes. I'll put everything on the line.
Yep. And she was kind of in almost like a weird role, like almost the opposite of Queen Vashti, because Vashti was called and she didn't go. And
Right.
then, Esther wasn't called, and back then, if you weren't called and you entered in, you could be killed, even if you were the queen. So she said to him, "I can't go in there. He's going to kill me." And he said, "Don't think," which is what we just read, "that he won't, that you won't be killed later on because you're a Jew." And she said, "Well, I guess if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. I'm going to go ahead and do it."
I love too the part in here where Mordecai says, God is going to find deliverance. If it's not through you, it's going to be through somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean, he shows incredible faith here. Like, God is still in control.
Yeah.
But I hope it's you that God uses
Right.
to help our people. If not, though, God will find another way.
Right, and we can draw that conclusion without even seeing the word God. That's the cool thing, is he says, what if you were put here for a reason?
Right.
What if you became queen for this particular purpose?
Right.
So here's the question we have for you guys. Is there anything in your life worth dying for? How do you respond when you hear about the Christian martyrs around the world?
I think most people would say their family.
Yeah.
I think, when we think about who would I die for, what would I die for, most people, I think, would say their family, and I think that's probably truthful.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people say their faith, but in that moment, do any of us really know how we would respond if our life was on the line for our faith? It is tough.
Yeah. That's the one thing I think about all the time is I read a book called Jesus Freaks, and it's all about stories of modern day martyrs. There's some they insert the story of Stephen and other guys that were killed in the Bible for their faith, but when you read about the people that are dying today, and then you see the news articles about Christians being beheaded in the Middle East, and it really gets you thinking, like, would I be able to do that? Would I, if they said either confess that you don't believe in Christ or we're going to kill you, what would my response be? And it's a tough thing to think about, especially in our really, really sheltered Western society,
I've seen statistics where more people have died for their Christian faith in the 20th century than all other centuries, 19th through the 1st combined.
Yep.
And part of it is that there's more people alive today
Sure.
than there has been in the past, but also it's that there's widespread persecution in places like China, in places like Africa, the Middle East.
Yep.
Often it goes unreported. We don't ever hear about
Right.
it. But I think often in America, we are very sheltered, and we think, oh, we don't have persecution like happened in the Bible. We don't, but it doesn't mean it's not happening
Right.
all the time.
Yep. So next in the story then, to see how Esther then shows her boldness and her humility, I guess, in a sense, she goes out.
And her intelligence.
And her intelligence, yeah. She approaches the king, for which she could be killed. We talked about this, but he holds out his scepter towards her, meaning he's pardoning her. And she asks him to go to a banquet, which is really interesting because I didn't see that coming the first time I read this story. Like, okay, banquet. So then
Right.
what's next?
Well, and I think, too, if you back up for a second, you realize she had not seen the king for 30 days.
Yeah.
So 30 days, he's not called on her one time, and she just approaches him.
Right.
And could have been killed on the spot. Thankfully, she isn't. And as you said, I think she shows her wisdom by asking the king to go to a banquet. And she really talks him up a little bit.
Right.
She's got flowery speech, long live the king, probably tells him what he wants to hear a little bit.
Sure.
And when the king says, sure, of course I'll go to a banquet, she also asks if Haman can come as well.
Yeah.
And Haman's doing like mental backflips at the time. He's like, I'm so important, even the queen is asking for my presence. He has no idea what is happening here.
Yep.
So Haman's wife suggests that he sharpen a 25-foot pole. I feel like that's not a common thing married people talk about.
No, I've never talked about
happened
that
here
with Kayla.
So
Yeah.
she says, sharpen a 25-foot pole, stick it in your yard, and start thinking about and hopefully anticipating the day where you can impale Mordecai on it.
Yeah, because he's thinking, I'm getting invited to this banquet. I'm going to be given more power. I'm going to be able to do
Right.
whatever I want.
Right.
And yeah, so when you read that, it's hard not to see the foreshadowing coming. Like, oh, he's being invited, which he doesn't really know why, but Esther clearly has a plan. And now he's setting up something to kill Esther's adoptive father, I guess. And so next, we see in Esther 7, 2 through 6, this part of the story. On this second occasion, while they were drinking wine, the king again said to Esther, "Tell me what you want, Queen Esther. What is your request? I will give it to you, even if it is half the kingdom." Queen Esther replied, "If I have found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my request, I ask that my life and the lives of my people will be spared, for my people and I have been sold to those who would kill, slaughter, and annihilate us. If we had merely been sold as slaves, I could remain quiet, for that would be too trivial a matter to warrant disturbing the king." "Who would do such a thing?" King Xerxes demanded. "Who would be so presumptuous as to touch you?" Esther replied, "This wicked Haman is our adversary and our enemy." Haman grew pale with fright before the king and queen.
And he had good reason to.
Yeah.
Because, I'm in trouble.
Yep.
Mordecai previously had saved the king's life and had largely gone unrewarded for this. So when this plot is revealed, the king remembers Mordecai's good deed. And at that moment, everything flips.
Mm-hmm.
And Haman is executed.
Yep.
He's impaled
On his own
pole.
Yep.
So a little bit of irony there. And Mordecai is rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
Question: have you ever felt unrewarded for doing something right? And why is it important to trust God in these situations?
Yes, I think pretty much everybody has felt that way
Probably
before,
so.
And it's important to trust God because if you're constantly thinking about what you're going to get for the things that you do, you've left God out of the picture. And that's a struggle sometimes, especially in ministry, because what people don't know, a lot of people don't know, is that a lot of it is behind the scenes work. And so when you can put yourself in a position where you're going to do something really cool and you're not going to get the attention you think you deserve, that's a great path towards humility and towards honoring God. So I think that's why it's important, because it brings you closer to Him when you can
if
do those
you
things.
want to fight your flesh, do a good deed in secret and get no credit for it.
Yep.
Leave a big tip on another table after you've gone to a restaurant. That is a great way to fight your own pride.
For sure.
So the law can't be reversed. It's too late. The king has already signed it. But the king signs another law where the Jewish people are given kingly authority to defend themselves and their property. And this is a huge turning point.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean, though, that they're still not attacked. Many of them are attacked.
Right.
They are killed, many of them, but also they're able to defend themselves to a point where they survive. And as a result, God sets up a festival that will be done in remembrance of God's deliverance through this really difficult time.
Yeah.
So last question, Andy, is people tend to have short memories when it comes to God's faithfulness. What Christian tradition most reminds you of God's faithfulness?
I mean, this is kind of like I couldn't think of a better answer.
come
This is
on.
the best answer, Easter. I mean, honestly, I know that we work, we have like all the services here, but
That was a little Hallmark channel, I would say.
yeah,
Andy.
I know but I couldn't think of a better one. You think about Easter, like I love Christmas, the time is magical and everything, and it's great, but man, Easter, our services are always about the crucifixion and resurrection, And when you get to see and just watch, like, even if it's just a depiction today that people have made of what happened, or if you read about what a crucifixion would have been like, that's God's faithfulness. That's where you see that Jesus did not deserve what was given to him, what he was put through, and he did it willingly. For me, that's God's faithfulness, because you can easily say, would I be able to go through that for other people? And
Right.
probably not.
Yeah, I made fun of you, but I totally agree. I mean, for me, Good Friday, every Good Friday, I think about the sacrifice Christ made, and he did it willingly. He didn't have to, but he went to the cross because he loved me and he loved you.
Yep.
Much like Queen Esther, who didn't stay comfortable even though she could have.
Yeah.
Jesus sacrificed himself for the sake of others, and he did it with a smile on his face.
Right.
He did it willingly.
Yeah. So, I mean, next, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking through the book of Job, which is an awesome, really long, but awesome book. And he had a really, really bad day.
I'd say he had a bad day.
It doesn't really matter. This is the point of the book. Pretty much doesn't really matter if we remain faithful to God when all hope appears to be lost. That's kind of the question we're going to be going through. Like, does our faithfulness determine what God gives us? Do our actions determine what we're going to receive in this life? And is it always our own fault when we suffer?
The joyful topic of suffering. I can't wait. It's going to be great.
Yeah, we'll talk about all that and more in the next episode.
All right, sounds good. See you if Kayla doesn't kill you.